That night on America's Got Talent, no one expected Simon Cowell to cry. The man who had built his career on sharp critiques and unflinching honesty was about to face something that would shatter every wall he had ever built around his heart. What started as just another audition would become the most emotional moment in AGT history, and it would happen right in front of 12 million viewers. The theater was packed that Tuesday evening in Los Angeles. The usual energy buzzed through the audience as families settled into their seats, phones ready to capture whatever magic might unfold on that iconic stage. Simon sat at the judges' table in his signature black shirt, arms crossed, wearing that familiar expression that had made him famous, the look that said he'd seen everything and wouldn't be impressed easily. But tonight would be different. Tonight, a family's desperate hope would collide with Simon's carefully guarded emotions, creating a moment so powerful that even the camera operators would struggle to maintain their composure. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this performance is still ahead. The family that walked onto the AGT stage that evening carried with them a story that had been 3 years in the making. David Martinez, a 45-year-old construction worker from Phoenix, held the hand of his 8-year-old daughter Sofia as they approached the microphone. Behind them, David's elderly mother Carmen walked slowly, her eyes already glistening with tears she was trying to hold back. What the audience didn't know, what even the producers had kept secret until this moment, was that this wasn't just an audition. This was a reunion that had been orchestrated in complete secrecy for months. 3 years earlier, David had been forced to make an impossible choice. When the pandemic hit, he lost his construction job and couldn't afford rent. With no family support system and facing homelessness, he made the heartbreaking decision to temporarily place Sofia with a foster family while he got back on his feet. It was supposed to be for just a few months. Those months turned into 3 years. During that time, David worked multiple jobs, saved every penny, and fought through a legal system that seemed designed to keep families apart rather than reunite them. His mother Carmen, who lived in a different state, had been searching for them both, not knowing where they had gone or if they were even safe. The foster family that had been caring for Sofia had seen David's consistent efforts to rebuild his life. They had watched him show up to every supervised visit, never missing a single one, even when he had to walk 6 miles because he couldn't afford gas. They had seen a father's love that never wavered, never gave up. Simon stopped the show. No one knew what was happening. When David and Sofia stepped up to the microphone, Simon's first instinct was his usual one, to find out what talent they were going to showcase. "So what are you here to show us tonight?" he asked in his typical direct manner. David's voice trembled as he spoke. "Mr. Cowell, we're not here to sing or dance. We're here because someone very special wanted to arrange something for my daughter and me." The confusion on Simon's face was evident. This wasn't how auditions worked. This wasn't the format. He looked toward the producers backstage, but they were nowhere to be seen. That's when the side door of the theater opened. Carmen Martinez, now 72 years old, walked slowly onto the stage. She was carrying a small teddy bear, the same teddy bear that Sofia had left behind when the family was separated. The bear that Carmen had been holding onto, hoping against hope that she would one day be able to give it back to her granddaughter. The recognition on Sofia's face was immediate and devastating. "Abuela!" she screamed, breaking away from her father's hand and running across the stage. The theater fell into absolute silence. Simon's expression began to change. His arms uncrossed. His usual composure started to crack as he watched the little girl throw herself into her grandmother's arms. But this was just the beginning. Carmen looked up at David, her son, whom she hadn't seen in 3 years. The man who had been too ashamed to call her when everything fell apart, too proud to admit he needed help, too heartbroken to explain that he had lost custody of his daughter. "Mijo," she whispered, and David collapsed. Not physically, but emotionally. 3 years of holding everything together, of being strong, of fighting every single day just for the chance to see his daughter again, came pouring out of him in that moment. Backstage, producers were begging him to continue, but he didn't. What the audience was witnessing was something that Simon had been secretly arranging for 2 months. After the show's talent scouts had heard David's story through the Foster family, they had reached out to Simon directly. Not to Howie, not to Heidi, not to Sofia Vergara. To Simon. The man who was known for his tough critiques had spent weeks working with private investigators to track down Carmen, who had been living in a retirement home in New Mexico, believing she had lost her family forever. He had arranged for the legal team to expedite the final custody hearings. He had even personally paid for the therapy sessions that social services required before the family could be officially reunited. All of this had been done in complete secrecy. When Simon saw David break down on stage, holding both his daughter and his mother, something inside him snapped. The walls he had built around his emotions over decades in the entertainment industry crumbled in seconds. He stood up from the judges' table. The audience gasped. Simon Cowell never left the judges' table during an audition. Never. He walked across the stage, his own eyes now filled with tears he wasn't even trying to hide. When he reached the family, he knelt down to Sofia's level. "Sofia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you remember what you told the nice people who were taking care of you? About what you wished for every single night?" Sofia looked up at him with wide eyes, still clutching both her father and grandmother. "I wish that my family would be together again." Simon's voice broke completely. "Well, sweetheart, your wish just came true. And it's never going to be undone again." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a legal document. "These are the final adoption papers. Your dad has full custody again. You're going home tonight. All of you." The theater erupted. Every single person in the audience was on their feet, sobbing and applauding simultaneously. Howie was crying. Heidi was crying. Sofia Vergara was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. But what happened next, no one in the theater, or watching at home, could ever forget. Simon did something he had never done in his entire career on any talent show. He pressed the golden buzzer. Not for a talent, not for a performance, but for a family. For love. For the reminder that sometimes the most important auditions aren't about what people can do, but about who they are. As the golden confetti fell from the ceiling, Simon wrapped his arms around all 3 family members. "I have a son," he whispered to David. "And if anything ever happened that separated us, I would want someone to help me the way I'm helping you tonight." The camera captured everything. Simon's tears, the family's overwhelming joy, the audience's emotional response. But most importantly, it captured the moment when Simon Cowell, the television personality, disappeared, and Simon Cowell, the human being, emerged. Later, when reporters asked him about that night, Simon would say it was the most important thing he had ever done on television. "We spend so much time looking for the next great singer or dancer," he said. "But that night, I realized that sometimes the most incredible performance is just a family being together." Share and subscribe. So this story will never be forgotten. The Martinez family never did perform a traditional talent on that stage. They didn't need to. Their love for each other was the performance. Their resilience was the talent. Their reunion was the standing ovation. 6 months later, David sent Simon a photo. It showed him, Sofia, and Carmen at Sofia's school graduation. David had landed a permanent construction job with benefits. Carmen had moved to Phoenix to be close to them. Sofia was thriving in school and had made the honor roll. The teddy bear that Carmen had carried onto the stage that night now sits on Sofia's bed every single night. But more importantly, so does the knowledge that her family is whole again. Simon kept that photo in his dressing room for the rest of the season. Whenever he felt himself becoming too harsh, too critical, too focused on the business of entertainment, he would look at that picture and remember that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply help people find their way back to each other. That night on America's Got Talent changed everything. Not just for the Martinez family, but for Simon Cowell himself. It reminded him that beneath all the success, all the fame, all the sharp critiques, he was still a father, still a son, still someone who understood that family is the only thing that really matters. The episode became the most watched AGT audition in the show's history. But for Simon, the ratings didn't matter. What mattered was that a little girl got to fall asleep in her own bedroom, in her father's house, with her grandmother just down the hall. The most powerful performance of the night wasn't sung or danced. It was simply three people remembering that they belong together, and one man remembering that sometimes being vulnerable isn't weakness, it's the greatest strength of all. What happened in the days following that emotional reunion became equally remarkable. Simon personally ensured that David received a full-time position with a construction company that had connections to AGT's production studio. He arranged for Sofia to receive a full scholarship to a private school near their new home. But perhaps most importantly, he made sure that Carmen received the medical care she needed for her arthritis, something she had been putting off because she couldn't afford the treatments. The ripple effect of that single night extended far beyond the Martinez family. AGT received thousands of letters from families who had been separated by circumstances beyond their control. Inspired by what they had witnessed, Simon quietly established a family reunification fund that has since helped reconnect over 50 families across the United States. People ask me why I did it. Simon reflected months later during a private interview. The answer is simple. When you become a parent, you realize that every child deserves to feel safe, loved, and wanted. David never stopped fighting for his daughter. Carmen never stopped believing she would see her family again. And Sofia never stopped hoping for a miracle. Sometimes, when you have the power to make miracles happen, you have a responsibility to do it. The teddy bear that Carmen brought onto the stage that night became a symbol that the family treasures. Sofia still sleeps with it every night, but now it represents something different than it did during those 3 painful years of separation. It no longer represents loss and longing. It represents the power of never giving up hope. Simon's relationship with his own son Eric changed after that night as well. He became more present, more emotionally available, more willing to show vulnerability. The walls that fame and success had built around his heart had been demolished by witnessing a family's unconditional love for each other. The Martinez family still sends Simon a Christmas card every year. It always features the same 3 people, but each year they look a little happier, a little more settled, a little more whole. And every year, Simon keeps those cards in his office as a reminder of what truly matters in life. Not the critiques, not the ratings, not the fame, but the simple, extraordinary power of human connection. The impact of that night extended beyond just one family. Other AGT contestants began to share their own stories of separation and hardship, knowing that the show had become a place where human struggles were not just acknowledged, but celebrated. Simon found himself approached by families from across the country, each carrying their own hopes for reunion and healing. That night changed how I see my role on this show, Simon admitted in a rare vulnerable moment during a later interview. I realized that sometimes the most important thing we can do is not judge someone's talent, but recognize their humanity. David didn't need to sing beautifully or dance perfectly. He just needed to be seen, to be heard, to be helped. The emotional weight of that evening stayed with everyone who witnessed it. The camera operators later said it was the hardest show they had ever filmed because they couldn't stop crying behind their equipment. The audience members who were there that night still talk about it as a life-changing experience, many saying it made them call their own family members to tell them how much they loved them. Even the other judges were permanently affected. Howie Mandel later said that he had never seen Simon show such raw emotion, and it made him reconsider his own approach to judging. We all put up walls in this business, Howie reflected. But Simon showed us that sometimes those walls need to come down, especially when it comes to matters of the heart. For Sofia, now a confident young woman pursuing her education with the scholarship Simon arranged, that night represents the moment her childhood truly began. I learned that sometimes angels come in unexpected forms, she said years later. Mr. Simon taught me that family isn't just about blood, it's about people who refuse to give up on you, even when they barely know you. The legacy of that evening continues to inspire the AGT production team to look beyond traditional talent when considering what deserves recognition on their stage. They now actively seek out stories of human resilience, family bonds, and the triumph of love over adversity, knowing that these moments often create the most lasting impact on their viewers.